네, 여러분 안녕하세요. 가을바람입니다. 오늘은 저희 IonQ의 가장 높은 경영진에 계시는 피터 제프맨 의장님 그리고 니콜로 데마 씨 사장님을 모시고 최근에 굉장히 큰 변화들이 있었는데 주주들이 가장 궁금해하시는 질문들을 가지고 인터뷰를 한번 가져보도록 하겠습니다. Hello, Peter and Nicole. Thank you for having us today.
Hey, Sean.
Honor and pleasure to be here.
I'm pretty sure all of the viewers know who you are, but could you guys briefly introduce yourself?
Nicola, why don't you go first?
So I'm Nicola Di Masi. I was the original SPAC sponsor of IonQ's IPO in 2020. I was on the board for 5 years, chairman of the Nom/Gov committee, and for the last 5 weeks, I've been the president and CEO.
And Peter Chapman, for the last 5 years, the president and CEO. And Nicola was my partner when we first started thinking about taking the company public. So we've been working together for quite a long time. And now, more recently, now the exec chair of IonQ.
All right, so we have quite a list here, so I'll start off with the first question. So everyone is wondering why was there a CEO change? So investors would appreciate a more detailed explanation.
So, one aspect of being a CEO of a public company, and especially one that's growing so quickly, is there seems to be unlimited demands on your time. And the reality is you probably could do 5 people for the president and CEO role and still keep them all busy. So it was clear that we needed to be able to scale out. And so by making this change, it gives us a lot more bandwidth at the top to be able to work on deals and those kinds of things. It also gives the company, to be honest, a good path for succession at some point. I'm no longer a spring chicken, as they say. So, and Nicola is got many more years in him than I do. So, so I think it's good just in terms of succession planning. But as we said at the earnings call, it isn't something where I'm going away, which is one of the reasons I'm here today, is just to reassure investors that it's not that I'm working any less than I was before. It's just I'm giving Nicola some of the work to be able to do, and the two of us are now kind of tag teaming it. He gets to do all the work I don't want to do. So.
No, all I would add to that is, Sean, as you know, when we IPO'd, we raised money to build the world's first and best quantum computer. When we IPO'd, we were the only machine that was on the Google, Amazon, and Microsoft public clouds. And I'm proud and surprised in some ways to say that 4.5 years later, we're still the only machine that's on all 3 clouds. So that says something about our robustness. But as Peter said, look, things always look sudden externally because in public companies in the US, nothing's done until contracts are signed. And so until Peter decided he wanted to do this, and until I had a contract, there was nothing to talk about. You can't talk about management succession until you do something. So it's always abrupt, if you will, from the outside. The only difference is whether or not people are changing roles and someone's leaving, which is not the case here, or they're announcing something that will happen in 6 months. So Peter and I could have said, we're going to make this change in 6 months or the end of the year, but we did it at the end of last year, which was just reported in February, this year. And because we've worked together so much, we have such a good relationship, and we've made all the major strategic decisions together, really nothing has changed. The strategy is identical to what it was 33 days ago. I will point out that the bandwidth constraint Peter has had has only been exacerbated by buying, and aggressively expanding into the quantum networking space. So we bought Cubatech in San Diego 6 months ago, and from SK Telecom, of course, we're closing a deal that we announced a month ago in Geneva and Seoul. And so the total addressable market here has doubled. And Peter and I are both fairly aggressive entrepreneurs, or public company leaders. And so we don't want to miss a beat in our ability to expand both of these growth vectors, right? And as we keep expanding the company, we absolutely are going to have our work cut out for us and be as busy as ever. We keep growing headcount, we keep growing the size of the leadership team, and of course we need to figure out how to get 1 + 1 = 3 when it comes to things like ID Quantique, Cubatech, and our ability to sell, be the only company in the world, actually, only public company in the world that does quantum computing and quantum networking in the same company. No one else has that.
Right.
Doesn't matter who you are. You know, Toshiba in Japan has a little bit of networking, and there are other quantum computing companies, but we're the only publicly traded company that does both, and I would argue is the leader in both.
We saw the CEO change, and you guys have raised a lot of money through ATM program recently. So how does IonQ plan to utilize the $700 million that you guys are holding after recent $370 million capital raise? That's one of the main questions we have.
We raised this money to support the networking business primarily, right? So the IPO, we raised $645 million, and that was to build our computing business out. Networking, we've made 2 acquisitions, and we've raised, another 360 to support that. And we intend to aggressively grow the 600 customers we have in networking around the world, from Samsung to SK Telecom to Singtel to EPB in Tennessee. We intend to aggressively grow our geographic footprint, and we intend to aggressively grow the application, team and footprint there, because we're just at the start of building our ecosystem, the IonQ ecosystem. And the IonQ ecosystem will be both computing and networking, and a tiny bit of quantum sensing that we've acquired with ID Quantique in Geneva and Seoul. And we want people to use our machines, pay to be on our machines, and the same with our really quite large portfolio of networking products. We're the only public company in the world that has computing and networking in the same business.
Right.
And the only company in the world that has 930 patents supporting both sides of the business, about 500 in computing and 400 in networking. And that's really quite an impressive moat if you think about that, globally filed.
Peter mentioned on your last earnings call that DARPA would announce Phase 1 benchmarking initiative, which was expanded to $300 million. So is IonQ likely to get any portion of that money?
Let me give you the background on the program first. So there's 3 phases to the DARPA contract. The first one is an initial $1 million, which, to be honest, probably is the amount of money required to fill out the paperwork to go for the other phases. Then there's a this is to the best of my knowledge, there's a $15 million phase 2 contract, and then there's a $300 million phase 3 contract. And so, these are available. It's not just one company, but many companies that can do this. The DARPA gave 2 contracts last year, the year before. One was to Microsoft and one was to PsiQuantum. That was a very unusual award. It was the program was the kind of what are crazy ideas in quantum that we could fund program. And so in that sense, the crazy ideas was a topological qubit inside quantum's qubit. So it's a funny thing to get that contract because it meant you really were out there. Those 2 have been selected for the $1 million in this next thing because they are already in the program before from last year. The program's changing now from kind of crazy ideas in quantum now to how do we get to scale in quantum. The next round of companies are about to be announced shortly, and they'll all be announced at the same time. And I would expect just common sense to apply that a wide range of companies will be selected in the first phase. And then as we go through the various phases, fewer and fewer companies will make it to the final $300 million grants per company. I expect that DARPA will be making those announcements in the next I believe in the next couple of weeks.
So IonQ applied to that program?
Yes, we did.
Oh, okay.
We did apply. Yeah, yeah. We applied, and we'll obviously they'll be making the announcement as to who has been selected in that.
In January, Peter, you mentioned that IonQ aims to have sales approaching $1 billion and profitability by 2030. So was this a broad long-term estimate, or is it more kind of a detailed projection behind this statement?
Well, what I would say, it probably a little bit of both, right? In the sense, when you make such a statement, you obviously want to have some idea of facts behind it before you do it. Part of it was the fact that we knew that the applications work we were doing with ANSYS and AstraZeneca was looking quite strong. We made announcements at GTC about those things, and that was on Forte. And so, we never expected, to be honest, to be able to show such strong results on Forte. We really thought that would be on Tempo. So now, you have to do, probably 100 to maybe 1,000 times better to disrupt a market. So you're going to need a Tempo system to be able to do that. So the projection was kind of based on the fact that not really on IonQ hardware sales per se, but on the fact that now applications were going to start to show up, which was going to drive usage towards our machines. And so, and we've talked about this many times in the past. One of the big changes in the last 18 months was really looking for applications that can take advantage of these early quantum computers. And so the fact that we now had such strong signals, that gave us confidence that said, hey, there's these large, like the ANSYS market is a $10 billion market, that this is something that we can now start taking workloads off and bringing to IonQ. And then you sit down and say, okay, well, what percentage of that market do you think you can capture? And obviously having a strong partner like ANSYS kind of enables you to get into those markets with a relatively low risk. And so the same thing in the pharmaceutical industry. So that's really where that kind of analysis came from, is kind of saying, okay, well, how many systems and what compute time, what do we think we can charge for that if suddenly everyone in the ANSYS customers now want to run on an IonQ quantum computer?
When does IonQ plan to launch AQ64 Tempo? Last year, I think you mentioned it will be launched around this April or June?
Actually, probably this fall would be my guess. Is the current time plan for Tempo. The first one will come out of engineering at that time, and then next year is really the time where they start shipping. Hopefully, larger numbers of units is the expectation for next year.
So by engineering, you mean starting to build the machine on fall?
The machine is being worked on and developed right now.
Right.
So it's that at the end of the fall is that we'd have a working machine.
Okay.
So you'll see announcements saying, hey, the first Tempo system is now up and running. But it's an engineering unit. It's not it wasn't intended to be shipped to a customer just yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we commissioned the first Forte systems, obviously, in Basel and AFRL, not that long ago. So remember, there's about a year lag between things working in a lab and things actually getting shipped to a customer, set up and operating. There's a lot of logistics and actually engineering work that happens to manufacture one of these systems, even once you've built one. But doing it at scale and repeatedly is, of course, its own exercise. Sean, I would just add to the prior question that we have about $200 million in bookings cumulatively from IPO, and the projection about 2030 is we said that by 2030 there would be approaching $1 billion of sales.
Right.
That we haven't been precise on whether or not we're talking about cumulative sales from the IPO to 2030 or or an amount in 2030 itself. And of course, sales for us is defined as bookings, revenue, research projects and other cash payments that we receive from customers. So we'll get more precise on guidance in due course, but we haven't given official guidance or official projections yet.
Okay. And for Nicolo, I think you mentioned on the last earnings call that IonQ would not use AQ anymore as performance metric. So what kind of new criteria will replace it in the company's roadmap? And is there a reasoning behind this change?
Yeah, so I'll take a crack at this and Peter will add on. Quantum computers are a complicated new beast, I would say. And as a physicist myself originally, the joke that professors of quantum mechanics always make is, if you think you understand quantum mechanics, you haven't spent enough time with it.
Right.
And Einstein himself said, he didn't believe in spooky action at a distance, and most people think Einstein was pretty smart. So the reality is, if you look at our quantum computers and what they can do, our customers get really great results in the pharmaceutical space with AstraZeneca, in the fault and anomaly detection space with General Dynamics, in the computational engineering space with General Dynamics. Airbus, we do cargo loading optimization for. And by the way, Sean, have you seen our investor deck ever? Do you see the deck that we present at Morgan Stanley and
Yeah, I did.
and that kind of thing? Okay, you've seen the slides because we can obviously show you some of those. We have a whole slide on our applications, and we're very customer centric at IonQ. We're very focused on commercialization.
Right.
We're very focused on building this ecosystem of computing and networking. And I would say that what we have learned is that, first of all, algorithmic qubits it's difficult to calculate after AQ64 because its classical analog is difficult to explain, and it's difficult to prove using classical computers because it's such a large and powerful machine. Secondly, you're finding that different types of metrics matter for different types of applications. So, image processing is not the same as, molecule simulation. It's not the same as worrying about logistics optimization or someday cryptography and code making and code breaking. And so what we said in the earnings call is that we need to bring out a new set of metrics, but they're likely to be application and customer specific. One of the challenges in this industry is that we were the first to commercialize, the first to go public. We have twice as much GAAP revenue in 2024 as the rest of all the public companies in the computing space combined.
Right.
So obviously we have the leading technical roadmap, we have the leading customer engagement, and people are paying us for our stuff. We're not giving it away as some companies have to do. And that means we do useful things. Now, as Peter said, we announced at GTC, Peter announced with Jensen Huang of NVIDIA just a week or two ago, that we were getting a 12% speed up with Ansys if they ran certain algorithms on our machine before they ran it on a classical computer. Now, Peter's correct, 12% is not 112% or 1,012%, but at the rate that we're improving our machine power, I think people are going to be surprised in the next year with what happens, right? Because tempo is 2 to the power 28 more powerful than Forte, and so it's 240 million times more powerful. So if we're getting 12%, results today, imagine what that 12% will become, in approximately a year. And so honestly, we like GAAP revenue, Sean, because it shows that you're doing something for a customer, right? And owning more of the value chain between what a computer can do and what the business result is part of the strategy for Peter and I, right? We want to control, obviously, the upside and drive as much quantum computing ecosystem creation as possible, as quickly as possible, because in the history of the technology markets, the companies that succeed long-term are the ones that build the best, deepest, and broadest customer ecosystem.
I'll just add a little to pile on a little bit on AQ. Originally, there was a number of algorithms that the QEDC had specified. You'll notice that we dropped one of the original algorithms, even in the specification for AQ. And the reason behind that is that the compiler could optimize it out that you didn't need a quantum computer to run it. One of the things that's happened also in this time frame is the compilers are getting better. And so the AQ numbers are really starting to be more of a benchmark on the compilers than they are on the hardware. And so that's a problem because we want the benchmarks to be driving the hardware. We want the compilers to get better as well. The other thing that's happened in the computer industry just classically is when you have a benchmark, it drives a behavior for your company to be able to produce hardware that does a better benchmark. But to Nicola's point, what we really want is to build hardware that solves a customer problem, not necessarily win in a benchmark. And so, one of the things we saw out back is like, hey, we can do, higher numbers of AQ, And it's like, well, it doesn't necessarily represent the hardware.
Mm-hmm.
And B, are those things still representing the needs that we see in the applications? And the answer was no. And so it was like, okay, well, let's come up with something then that's more customer focused. That was when we came up with AQ and the QEDC, you know, was the quantum industry put together those things. That was the best guess at that time that they were going to represent kind of the needs of users. But, you know, we now actually have customers like, you know, ANSYS, and we really know now what it is that they want. And so, you know, it's not too surprising that the benchmarks before that we created, you know, aren't meeting what we're seeing in terms of the current market, because we just know a lot more, both about where the quantum computers are and obviously where the customers are.
So the new metric will be revealed soon.
Yeah, we will. We will come out with you know, it's a hotly debated topic at the moment behind the scenes as to what is something that fairly represents the hardware, right? You know, it's and it's a hotly debated thing even within the larger contest. Is it people are saying it should be logical qubits, right? You know, there's quite a bit in there, so more to come.
Okay.